one of the things that, thank you so much, honey. One of the things that we also have coming up that most of us are super excited about is our At the Movies. So that starts not next week, but the next week. And I will tell you, I love At the Movies. Give a little shout out if you love At the Movies. I know it's one that we like a lot. And this is 10 years this year that we've been doing At the Movies. And I'm going to be fully honest that sometimes it takes a lot. It's very exciting. So I'm just going to, like I said, just be honest. It takes a lot of work sometimes to do it, to put all the scripts together, to do all the filming, to do those of you that help us, decorate and all the things that we do. It's a great time. But sometimes I kind of think, is it worth it? Is it, we love it, but does it actually change lives of people? Because that's what we're all about, right? That's why we do what we do, is because we want to bring people closer to God. We want to be able to change people's lives. And so over the last, month or so, that was one of the things that I was praying about. Do we even want to keep doing At the Movies? And don't throw things at me, but just kind of like thinking about, is this something that really is worthwhile? And last week, Mark and I went to our family camp, and it was so amazing because I had this young girl come up to me and say, "Are you the pastor at the well?" And she and her grandma were telling me about 2 years ago, they came to visit. They're actually live in Olney, Illinois, where Stacy is right now. They're not at her church, they're at a different church, but they were here visiting, and they happened to come to our church on the day that we did the Sound of Freedom movie. So if you guys, either if you were here or you have seen that, we talked all about human trafficking. We talked about in the Free Methodist Church some of the things that we do with an organization called Set Free. We talked all about that. And if you would pull up that picture, Emmy, that I sent, this is, maybe it was already up. This is, she had this set up. Her name was Kendall, and she's 15 years old, and just coming to that one service changed her whole path of what she wants to do with her life. She had a table set up at camp about human trafficking. That's what she is going to be going to school for, to look at just international studies and doing things, but that is what she wants to do with her life now, is to help end human trafficking. So I was like, okay, God, that was a pretty dramatic way to tell me that, yes, At the Movies matters and that we should still keep doing it. But I just wanted to share that with you because I thought that was so amazing. And it was somebody that honestly isn't even part of our church, just happened to be here that day, but just changed kind of the trajectory of her life. So just wanted you to all be excited. So we're gonna keep it on, keep doing that. So we're excited. So this morning, before we get started, I know that when you come to church, and I thank you guys for coming, for taking out time today to be here, but I know we all have lots of things going on in our minds. And so I know sometimes whenever we sit down to listen to who's ever speaking, and thank you, I think Caden's in the back, I don't understand, but thank you, Caden, for last week, for your great message that you had. But sometimes when we come, we have all these things going on, all of these ideas, and it's hard sometimes just to settle and just to listen. So what I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes for just a minute. And I want you to imagine that you have a big whiteboard in your mind. And we're going to take out one of those black expo markers that we're collecting for Stringtown. And I want you just to write down on that whiteboard all the things that are going on in your mind. What you're having for dinner, what the kids are doing this week, appointments that you have, just all of the stuff that's running through your mind. And just write that on that whiteboard. Just let it sit there for a minute. Now you're going to take an eraser, and you're going to erase all of those things off of that whiteboard. And when you get those things erased, open up your eyes, and you can look back at me. I promise in about 25 minutes when we're finished, maybe longer, those will all still be there for you to come back to and write again. But for just the next few minutes, just focus on not what I have to say, but what God has for you to hear today. And think about how what he says to you today can change your heart and change what he wants for you today. So we have something. Well, backtrack a little bit. If you have been with us, we've been reading through the Bible this year. So we are all together using Tara Lee Cobble and reading each week together through the Bible. So we have been reading a lot about the two kingdoms, Israel and Judah, and all their crazy kings, and everything that's going on with them, and how they keep falling away from God and coming back to God, and falling away from God and coming back to God. So we're going to continue with that today. But first, I want us to think about an altar. So we have, in our church, if you're not familiar, if you didn't grow up in church and you're not really familiar with church, this right here, this kind of wooden thing that we have in the front is what we call an altar. And an altar is just, it's not any kind of special wood or anything like that. It's just a place where you come to meet God. Sometimes we come and pray there. Sometimes, we lay our burdens there. Sometimes it's just a place for us to remember God and come to him. But I have a few different images. If we would pull up that first one, in the Old Testament, this is actually, that's really close. This is actually kind of what an altar looked like. So it was just made of stone. It almost looked more like a tower, because when we talked about, especially in Leviticus, we talked about how they would bring different animals and sacrifices and lay them on the altar. It wasn't long and skinny, kind of like what we think about now. It was more of a tower, so they would lay those things. We can go ahead to the next picture. This is maybe what some of us think about. This is a Catholic church at Christmas time, all decorated and beautiful. This is sometimes what we think about with an altar that's just very ornate and very beautiful. And we've got one more image next. And the last image here is just kind of more of a modern day church. Maybe some of you have been to a church like this where they don't necessarily have a wooden altar like this, but maybe they use their stairs or they use the edge of the stage that people come up to and pray. All of those are altars. There's not really anything different about any of those, because an altar doesn't have to be, doesn't have to be the actual thing that it is. It's what it represents, and it represents a time and a spot for us to meet God. Now, it shows where our loyalty is. And what I want us to think about today is that every single one of us, every single heart has its own altar. So think about that for a minute. Every heart has its own altar. We all worship something. And the question is what we worship at that altar of our own heart. We're going to read two short passages that are going to kind of frame our time today. And we're going to be in 2 Kings. And again, we're looking at those Israelites. We're looking at that northern kingdom and remember, if you have been here the last 3 weeks, remember that northern kingdom, all of the kings turned away from God. In the southern kingdom of Judah, some of them were good and some of them turned away from God. But in that northern kingdom, they all turned away from God. So we're going to be reading 2 Kings. We're going to be looking at chapter 17 today, and we're going to start with verses 7 and 8. This disaster came upon the people of Israel because they worshipped other gods. They sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them safely out of Egypt and had rescued them from the power of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. They had followed the practices of the pagan nations the Lord had driven from the land ahead of them, as well as the practices of the kings of Israel had introduced. We're going to skip down to verses 15 through 18. They rejected his decrees and the covenant he had made with their ancestors, and they despised all of his warnings. They worshipped worthless idols, so they became worthless themselves. They followed the example of the nations around them, disobeying the Lord's command not to imitate them. They rejected all the commands of the Lord their God and made 2 calves from metal. They set up an Asherah pole, and they worshipped Baal and all the forces of heaven. They even sacrificed their own sons and daughters in fire. They consulted fortune tellers and practiced sorcery and sold themselves to evil, arousing the Lord's anger. Because the Lord was very angry with Israel, he swept them away from his presence. Only the tribe of Judah remained in the land. So Israel had sinned. They had done all of this stuff. And I love how it talks at the beginning about all the things that God had done for his people, how he had brought them out of slavery, how he had brought them into their own land. But they rejected him, and they did all of these things. And I think that one line, I mean, it sounds harsh, but they worshiped worthless idols, so they became worthless themselves. And that's so hard for us to imagine. But it doesn't mean that God didn't see them as someone that he loved. It means they weren't able, they didn't have any light. They weren't able to put anything into the world because they worshiped these things that were so worthless. And they looked at all the customs. They just followed everything that those around them had to offer instead of what God had for them. Now, we're going to look. I want you to keep that in mind. That is one thing that was happening to the Israelites. Now, we're going to drop to the next chapter, to chapter 18, and we're going to look at, remember, in the kingdom of Judah, there were some good kings. So we're going to look at a king that came in and made a difference. So we're going to look at 2 Kings chapter 18. We're just going to look at verses 3 through 5. And it reads, "He did what was pleasing." And they're talking about King Hezekiah that came in. "He did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, just as his ancestor David had done. He removed all the pagan shrines. He smashed all the sacred pillars and cut down the Asherah poles. He broke up the bronze serpent that Moses had made, because the people of Israel had been offering sacrifices to it. The bronze serpent was called Nehushtan. Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before or after his time." I love where it says, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. He broke down all of the Asherah poles. He got rid of all these pagan shrines. He did what was right. So we saw 2 chapters here. In one chapter, they were turning away from God. And because of that, no one was following God. But in the other chapter, they were breaking down all of those things and turning back to God, and God was with them. There were 2 outcomes. Israel was exiled, but the other, Judah, was restored and brought back to God. There were 2 altars when we're looking at this. One was an altar, their heart was selfish. They were doing everything that everyone around them was doing. But then the altar of Judah that King Hezekiah was over, that was an altar that followed God. Their hearts loved God and followed him. Today we're going to talk about idolatry and what it is. Now, I haven't been to all of your houses, but I'm assuming most of us don't have a golden calf in our kitchen that we go down and worship. Those are not the things that we have to really think about or worry about today. But we all worship something. We all idolize something. It's just dressed up a little bit different. It looks a little bit different today. It maybe has a little bit different language or a different location, but we all have something that we worship. So today my aim is first to help you to name whatever idols that you have in your life. Some of you might instantly know some things that you worship. But some of us, as we talk today, maybe God will bring those things to your heart, and you don't realize yet that those are things that you put in place of him. And after that, I want us to look at how we can restore and replace God instead of those things that we are worshiping. So we're going to look at first just what the Bible means by adultery, and it's hard to say idolatry and adultery, because whenever I was practicing, I kept getting those two words. So we're looking at idolatry, things that we worship instead of God. So in the Old Testament, when we're talking about idolatry, it means that we are putting something instead of God. So it's the displacement of God from his rightful place as Lord. So we are created to worship God. He is the one thing, the one and only thing we worship. So when we look at idolatry, we're displacing, we're putting something else in that place. And I've got two quick ideas about what that looks like in our lives. First of all, idolatry is relational. It's not about the statues that we worship. It's not about the actual, maybe physical thing that we worship. It's about where you run to when your life is hard, when something hurts you, when you're stressed out, when your identity is shaken, when something happens in your life, where do you go? Maybe you go to alcohol or drugs. Maybe that's something you're seeking, some kind of escape or something to be numb, to just forget that pain. Maybe you go to, your work or being successful at a career because your identity is important, and that's something that helps you and makes you feel better about yourself. Maybe it's a romantic relationship or sexual relationships because that fills something up in you for a short time. It validates you. It feels like it completes you. Maybe it's money. For some people, money is security. And it's saying, whenever I'm shaken, whenever I don't know what to do, I'm just going to get more money because I know that money will be there for me. Money will help make me secure. Maybe it's social media or just that constant attention, those likes, that validation that, somebody sees me. Somebody thinks that I'm important. And it honestly, just like we sang today, it could be religion. It could be spirituality. It could be something like that. But instead of a relationship with God, sometimes we just go to the church, to legalism, to all the rules, and say, okay, if I follow these rules, these things that I'm supposed to do, then I'll be secure. I'll be okay, instead of the relationship. So take a minute to think about that. When life hurts, when something is going on in your life, when, a loss of a job or a sickness in the family or something else that happens, where is the first place that you turn? Because if it's not God, then that's what you have put in place of him. So first, idolatry is social. It's that relationship that we have with God and honestly with others sometimes too. The second one is idolatry is syncretic. And I honestly, when I was studying and I looked this up, I didn't know what that word meant. It kept coming up in some of the books I was reading. So I had to look at exactly what that meant. And I thought it was such an important idea that I wanted to show you. I've got an image up here to kind of show you what that means. And basically, it means just to have, if you have different kinds of religions around you. I'm not sure if we have that up there or not. But it's like if you have different kinds of religions, just like we talked about. There we go. So it's different systems. So we have maybe the religious beliefs. We talked about how the Israelites were in, they took some of the Canaanite beliefs. They took some of the Egyptian beliefs. They took all of those beliefs of people that were around them, along with their beliefs that they had learned about Yahweh, about the one true God, and they kind of just mesh all of that together. And that's what it means that idolatry can be putting all of those things together. And the text that we just read said that the Israelites followed the customs of the nations. And that's what this is. And sometimes it can look holy, because you can have, all of these ritual things that you do. They were still going to the temple. They were still, doing all the different things, following all the different holidays, all the feasts and things that they were doing. And they were adding all these other spiritual kinds of things to them. But what this says is it says, I'll worship God, but I'll also worship other things. I'll also have a little bit of God, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and we'll stir it up into what suits me the best. And that is also idolatry, because it's putting other things in place of the true God. So those are just a couple of things to think about as we think about ourselves and what we put in place of God. So I'm just going to name 3 things that as I was looking and I was studying, that I really feel like as a whole that our society idolizes and puts in place of God. And I want you to think about each one of these as we talk about them, and if this is something that God is telling you that you run to. It could be something totally different that we're not talking about, so be open to what God is saying to you today. But the first one is comfort. And what comfort says is we're just going to avoid pain at all cost. We all run into some kind of pain, whether it's physical pain, whether it's emotional pain, any kind of things. We're going to, in our life, run into some pain. And so what comfort says is we're just going to avoid it. We're going to figure out how to get rid of it. And it promises safety, and it promises predictability, that I know what's going to happen. I don't have to think. I don't have to worry about what's next. In ancient Israel, they had these high places. That's where they would go and worship. So if you're reading, especially in the Old Testament, where it says, they went to the high places and they worshiped and they did all these things. Well, today, I feel like our high places that sometimes we go to worship is our couch with our giant TVs, our nice little, blankets that are all cozy and comfy that we watch, and we just seek that comfort and disengage from life. Now, does not mean we don't ever sit and watch a movie or we don't ever, get comfortable. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that when that becomes our go-to, when something is wrong, and every time that's what we want to do, is we want to go just turn on Netflix and have our mind, watch 37 episodes of a show in a row. Not that I'm calling anybody out. That we just watch those over and over to just disengage from our life. That's when it becomes an idol in our life. It whispers, it's better to be comfortable than to step out in faith and be vulnerable with someone else. We just want to sit back and be comfortable. And that's what the Israelites did. They looked at what was around them and what was comfortable. And they just started with those idols. They just thought, well, this is what everybody else around me is doing. This is what they're worshiping. This is what they're going to. And so they stayed comfortable with those. Comfort that replaces God leads to spiritual atrophy and ultimately exile from God's presence. That's what we read in 2 Kings 17, is that when they got that comfort, whenever they were looking at all of the different idols, the different gods, that they were so comfortable that God left them and left their presence. And if you have read this week, we're starting to look at how they were actually physically exiled when Babylon came in. And so think about that. Is comfort something that you go to? And like I said, don't hear me saying we're never allowed to be comfortable, that we want to be able to have some time to be able to do that. But do you go to comfort to just shut your brain off all the time, anytime something is wrong or is upsetting to you? The second one is approval. Now, approval, especially today, in the social age that we have, in just social media and everything, that approval is something that is so important. And the ancient Israelites, they would chase this honor because they wanted people to know, who they were. There was something, you think about, it's been a while since we read this, but when Joshua went around in Jericho, and they already knew, we talked about Rahab, they already knew and were fearful of the Israelites coming. The Israelites kind of had some charisma, some idea, like people knew who they were. But they also would be rejected because they only followed the one true God. And so they wanted to get those other, that approval, those other gods too. Approval says, I matter because other people validate who I am. Approval becomes an idol when it shapes our decisions more than God's word does. So think about that. When we perform, when we, curate our social media page, when we're doing things for applause instead of because that's the decision that God made for us, that just shows the faithfulness that we are lacking in that. And the third one is money. And we talked about this a little bit at our Dream Team Huddle this morning. Again, there's nothing wrong with having money. I mean, we need money to survive. But when we look at money as a way to offer security, as that ultimate peace, that we need to have money to be able to keep going, and we get stressed out all the time about our finances, and we don't have any trust in God, that's when it becomes an idol to us. We read a couple weeks ago about how if you were to just look outside at the Israelites, they had, a great market system. They had, lots of trade, lots of buying and selling. It looked great from the outside. So money and wealth was great with them at this time. But their hearts cared more about that than they cared about their relationship. Money says, if I have enough, I can control my life. And I think that money and control are tied so much together, because if we feel like we have enough money, we don't have to depend on God to take care of us and to have any faithfulness in our life about that. So looking at these, you might kind of think, well, God seems kind of petty when it comes to, all these different idols that are in front of us. But the biblical term for that is actually jealous. And sometimes, especially if you think about, like an ex-girlfriend or something like that, the word jealous kind of has a negative connotation. But when we think about how God is jealous for us, it means that he's guarding his relationship with us. We were created to worship him. Our relationship with him is the most natural, most important thing. He knows that is what is best for us. And so when he sees us following these other gods, these other things in our life, he is jealous for us because he loves us and he wants us to follow him because it's the best for him. He wants us to flourish. He wants us to have that life of abundance. And when the Israelites started worshiping all these other gods that were around them, all these other things that were around them, God took himself away from them, and they were in exile. And that was not because he was mad at them. It was to show them, this is what your life is like without me. It's kind of like when someone hits rock bottom, and that's the best thing that could happen to them. That's what he was showing the Israelites. You want a life without me? This is what it is. Because the best, I can offer you the best that there is. So then we read about Hezekiah that came in, and he knocked all of those things down. He restored the altar of the Lord. He brought the people back to redemption. And I want us to look at how we can do that today in our own lives. We talked about those three things. We talked about comfort. We talked about money. And we talked about approval. So think about those things. Is there one of those things in your life that stands out? And like I said, maybe God is telling you something completely different in your life that stands out. We're going to look at some things that we can do to recenter our lives. Now, like I said, we probably don't have, idols like a cow or anything in the middle of our kitchen, but we do have something that all of us have every day. And I bet every single one of us, even our younger ones, maybe not our babies, but our younger ones, have a phone that we pick up 100 times a day. I have, and maybe I've had this, but I just noticed it this week, is that on my phone I can see how many times I pick it up, and I did not like that very much. I'm not going to look at that again. But this can be an idol. I mean, it's small. It's just seems so insignificant, but there is so much on this that we can worship. We can watch things that turn our heart away from God. We can post things that we hope we seek approval from others. We can listen to people gossip and spew on about all kinds of stuff that should not be that high of a place in our lives. So this is something that we can seek. We might even seek comfort. I mean, I'm not necessarily someone that watches 37 hours of a TV show in my house, but I might sit and get on TikTok for like 3 hours and just kind of doom scroll through that. So this, we can seek comfort sometimes, not true comfort, but comfort from this sometimes too. So what is really important is that we're not just knocking those things down. We could, smash up our phone. We could get rid of it. I mean, I thought it would be really cool if I stood up here and smashed my phone up and everything, but then I'd have to buy a new one because I need my phone. But we could figure out ways to limit that. We could get rid of that maybe get rid of different apps or get rid of different things. But that's still not bringing us back to God. That might take away some things. And that's the first step, is to name that idol and get rid of that, take that away, just like Hezekiah knocked those things down. But when we take those things away, there's still that empty space. So we need to replace those things with something else. And I will tell you, if you talk to me for more than 30 seconds, hopefully, you will know that I think the best thing to replace it with is the Word of God. And there is nothing that will bring you closer to God than just reading His Word daily. Like I said, as a church, we are reading the Bible together. And if you're not part of that plan, I can show you that plan. But you don't have to do that. You can read a few verses every day. You can find a different plan there on your phone, again, that goes with this. There are tons on the Bible app. There are tons of Bible plans that you can do also. But get however is best for you. Figure out a way just to get into God's Word. Because if you find those idols and take them away, that's awesome. That's an amazing thing to do. But that's only the first step, because we have to bring God back into that and replace Him. Idolatry is practical and habitual. So just, it's a habit. The things picking up our phones, looking at, things on TV, what we do. Think about what you do when you get home from work. Is the first thing you do, put on your pajamas and lay on the couch. Like what are those habitual things that you do? But freedom from that idolatry is also practical and habitual. I will be really honest with you. One of the things that we have talked about over probably the past couple months is just the idea of putting phones away and sitting down at the dinner table together as a family. And my husband has been really good at leading us in that. Last night, I just was tired, and I was like, I just want to sit and watch TV and eat my food. And he was like, no, we sit at the table. Remember, we've been doing this. It's been really good. And so those things, just sometimes you don't feel it. But those things that, just like following idols, is that habit forming, that practice. so is replacing that with the things of God and those relationships and talking about that. That is just a practice and a habit that you get into. So I just want to look really closely at just 3 more things, how we do this. So the first one is, how do we tear down these idols? We diagnose. We look and we see, okay, what is the idol? What am I doing? Like I said, we talked about 3 today. Maybe God's telling you something else. But diagnose. What is the idol in my life? You can ask, what is keeping me from putting him in the center? Where do I run when things are going wrong in my life? Number 2, you remove that. You get rid of it. You might, we're not all going to quit our jobs if that is part of your idol, but how can I maybe not have my identity so tied in that? So you might have to be creative in the ways you do this. We can't, unfortunately, I guess we could throw away our phones, but we do need to be in contact. We do need, things for that. So are there apps that you can get rid of? Are there, different times? Can you put yours in silent mode? I know my watch, I forever did not want to get a watch because I didn't want it tied to my phone, but then I'm trying to work out a little bit more, so I wanted to get my steps. So I just turned my watch on. My watch is always in silent. I never get any text from my watch. And that doesn't mean you have to do that. That's just, for me, a way that has helped me not be tied to my phone. So figure out what you need to do to practically remove those things. And then the last thing you have to do, because if you just do those first 2 things, you're going to have that empty space. And you're just going to, because of those habits, you're just going to pick those things back up. So replace them with the things of the Lord. Reading your Bible, praying, having conversations with other Christians in your life. We'll be starting in just a little bit over a month. We'll be starting back in our life groups. Get in a life group. Have those conversations. Have those groups with other Christians that you can go to and talk to them about what is going on. So as we look at those things, think on your own right now about how you could do those. And different ideas. I just looked at the time. I went through and talked about different ways we could do each one of those, but we're running a little short. So if you have one that you want to have questions, come to me and ask and say, hey, I'm really dealing with this idol of money. What are some things that I can do to help replace that? Come and ask. Ask some of your Christian friends too how they do that. But I want you to think about just a few things before we wrap everything up. But I want you to remember that idols are not true. Idols are from the enemy. And what the enemy does, it tells us that his native language is to lie. And so what that does is it tries to give something false to us. And if we're looking for comfort, we're looking for identity, we're looking for all of those things, the devil tries to tell us, oh, you can get this from me in this way. But where comfort promises that numbness, that we don't have to feel anything, Christ gives us a real peace. So we feel those things, but we're able to be at peace with them because of what Christ did for us. Where approval promises identity, that, I am somebody because somebody cares about me. Christ gives us true belonging in his family as children of God. And where money promises safety and promises security, Christ gives us provision. He says, I will take care of you, just like the sparrows, just like the lilies. You will never want. I will take care of you. So think about that. Name it. Figure out what your idol is. Figure out how you can remove that from your life, and then replace it with the things of God. I want you to go ahead and bow your heads right now, and I'm going to give you just